and welcome back to the Mom and Mind podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. On this episode of Behind the Sessions, I want to dig in a little bit, kind of maybe even just scratching the surface, to be honest, of the loneliness that a lot of people talk about in this transition into motherhood. It comes up a lot in therapy, honestly. And in a lot of different contexts. One of the ways that it shows up is how just the transition into going from being kind of like relatively um, carefree in the sense of not having to think about somebody else's schedule and then moving into managing, a whole other person's life, and how sometimes that weight can be carried by one person, and oftentimes that's mom. Um, and how lonely that can feel to go from, let's say, having a relationship where it's two people who felt like maybe, for the most part, feeling like partners, or that things were more evenly split in terms of household responsibilities. To all of a sudden going into a dynamic where the mom is responsible for a lot of things, figuring out child care, like literally what to do to take care of this child, learning skills and tools uh, to figure out feeding, sleep, mm, getting groceries, and just household tasks, and any of those number of things. Now, of course, there are a lot of variation in this for different people and different couples. Um, and as I usually like to qualify when I'm talking about stuff, because the majority of people that I meet with are women and moms, um, that I'm not talking about all couples and all partners. Um, but I am talking about um, a dynamic that happens a lot and still too often, in my opinion, in kind of our more modern day and age. That I don't know if it's, when I was reflecting on it today, that there's, is there something almost ingrained, either culturally or maybe even like a gender based, sort of like something in the water that shifts, so that things that may or may not have felt relatively equal as partners, now moving into parenthood, where all these kind of like default positions start coming into place, meaning mom is responsible for baby and house, um, and in a way that, you know, ends up for her and for some of the people that I meet with feeling very isolating. And there's also something to be said for, if you have the bulk of responsibility of taking care of, you know, um, baby and household related things, that the more and more that happens, the more and more it becomes your responsibility. Like it kind of can feed on itself. Um, and some of those things are sort of like natural consequences, if you will, of mm, basically how our systems are set up to not actually be supportive of parents. So, like, let's say, um, mom birthed a child, whether it was, in whatever way the child was birthed, and they're in our current system has more time to take off of work, and hopefully rest and recover and have help to do that. Oftentimes not, um, but they're primarily responsible for feeding and all those things. And then at some point, relatively quickly, dad or partner go back to work. So there's already kind of a split in the day and in a split of responsibilities that brings in a natural kind of feeling lonely if one parent goes off to work and the mom is home having to figure out all of these details on her own. It is really hard to catch somebody up if they've been gone all day. um But, like, of all of the details of things that happened during the day, all of the little things that mom had to do to try and figure out how to get baby to nap, or this trick that works to help baby fall asleep. Um, those are all things that are like worked out in in the moments of the day, um, a day after day. And um once you have that kind of split of mom at home, partner at work, there's just this natural separation, um, where two people living in the same house are living two very different lives. And honestly, sometimes dads feel alone and lonely in the process because they might feel disconnected, or might, you know, be off for the day and then come back to people that they love and care about, but also aren't really connected to what's been happening all day long. However, we're also not really set up societally, culturally to have real discussions about that. Um, and honestly, when people are exhausted, there's not a lot of time or energy or bandwidth to have like these discussions about how really was your day, what really happened today. So anyhow, this starts to compile, rather it starts to compound over time, and it doesn't even need to be that long of a period of time. So again, in the context of loneliness, when mom is home alone, figuring these things out and trying to figure them out, there's another kind of shade to this loneliness, which is to not really know if you're doing things well or right, or and again, I'm not saying that that is a value that I'm placing out there. I'm talking about how people feel about um their experience as mothers in these first days, weeks, months, when there's no community intact and when they're not receiving the help that they need. It's more likely that they'll feel alone. Side note to feeling alone, moms could be surrounded by people and still feel alone. The kind of loneliness that I'm talking about isn't like there are people here, so you know, I feel like I'm surrounded by people. It's feeling connected, feeling understood, feeling supported. And that kind of a loneliness, you can feel alone with one person around and you can feel alone with 100 people around. It's the quality of com- connection and the quality of support that I'm talking about. So this, like feeling alone and having to figure out details, feeling alone and having to um, make decisions, uh, a feeling alone, literally alone during the day, and then so exhausted by the end of the day that it's hard to connect. It's hard to want to connect, like meaning like the need and desire for connection is always there for most people, but wanting to like put the energy out to do that after you've had a long exhausting day, it's really really hard. So the capacity for mm, getting the connection and maintaining the connection with a partner is much harder. Um, and there are a lot of reasons why that can be difficult. One of which is just like really purely just very exhaustion, people being tired. Um, the other part is, having had baby duty all day and just wanting some like downtime and quiet if all of you've heard all day, or um, you know, crying, or um, any number of other things that could be overstimulating. Um, Once help arrives at the end of the day, it can be hard to want to have a full conversation and really dig into stuff, um, if you don't have the bandwidth to do that. So the loneliness can be the disconnection from partner, um, in that way. Not that, again, not that people don't want the connection to like feel the connectedness to their partner, but it's just like functionally really hard to do if you're exhausted. And there's another way that loneliness and the feeling of being alone shows up in that is connected to community, or not having community. That could be family, it could be friends. Um, but often it's like not having the connection to, mm, well, how should I say? Like feeling lonely in regards to not having connection to other people who are going through similar things to you. So, other moms who are also newly postpartum, um, in this example, who are all kind of in the depths of trying to figure this motherhood thing out. Rather, I'll come back to that in a moment. Like the parenting part of motherhood, parenting a newborn, a young infant. Oh, if you don't have other people who are going through that around the same time as you, who can have real conversations about what it's like, and how hard it can be, it can result in you feeling alone in a different way. Like you could go to, a mother's group, that's not specifically focused on, postpartum mental health. And it's a group of moms, and that there could be some ways that you feel connected there. But if you're going through any kind of perinatal mental health condition anywhere along the scale of intensity, from like relatively mild to certainly in the more severe, if you're in a group with people who are not talking about real stuff, it can feel very isolating and you can feel very alone. Like it can feel like you're the only person going through it. Or it might be that other moms in that group are also going through it, but if nobody's talking about it, then there's like a depth of, connection and a depth of real and, truth that is not happening in that circle. And nothing against those mom groups, they're fine for general community. But when you are going through any type of significant mental health, strain, transition, challenge, and you like, let's say you walk into a room or a group and you try and like feel out how is this going to go, or feel out like, did any of these other people seem to be going through anything similar to what you're going through. If it doesn't feel like that, then it's going to be hard to open up. It's going to be hard to put yourself out there because, unfortunately, there's still so much stigma, and embarrassment and shame around, mental health, specifically as a new parent. So that part of feeling isolated is a sum about connection, not being connected to other people going through what you're also going through. But it's also feeling lonely in the sense that the way that not feeling understood makes you feel lonely. I mean, there's so many different aspects and sort of shades of the way loneliness can feel. So you could, for instance, have a supportive partner, supportive family members, people who are pitching in and helping you with various things. Um, but if you're dealing with a perinatal mental health condition and nobody around you knows what really that is, or what it feels like, or how to identify with you, or how to talk to you about it, even if you have, uh, supportive people around you, you can still feel alone in your experience, meaning nobody around you is feeling or experiencing the same thing that you are. even if they love and care about you and you feel that from them, there might be this part that um where you just can't connect with people, or they don't feel connected to you, or you feel like you're going through it alone, um because they just don't know what it's like. So you might have had the experience where you are going through something like depression or anxiety. You try and explain it to somebody who's never experienced it, and they can be like, wow, that sounds like it really sucks. And I'm sorry you're going through that, but I have no idea what that feels like. Um, and like, that's one of the things I find that is most important during this period of time. Like, the remedy for loneliness is connection and understanding. And that can be hard to find. Um, Sometimes you can find it through therapy. Sometimes you can find it through support groups, like talking to other people who are going through things similar to what you're going through. And sometimes you can find that through community, not necessarily therapy, but supportive community. One of the parts of um, loneliness that really just bums me out the most and honestly makes me angry is that when I'm sitting one on one with the mom who's suffering, who's feeling alone and feeling the depth of loneliness, and let's say she's like trying to figure things out. She's a first time mom. All of this is new. And if there's not like I said, the community support, or if they haven't been around um, babies or other moms who are trying to figure this out for the first time, um, there is a sense of feeling alone as it relates to not knowing what they're doing. So it's not that people don't know what they're doing. They're trying to figure out what they're doing. But we, I'll just speak for the US and maybe some other cultures that are more individualistic. If you don't have the support around you, you don't have the societal structures in place, the cultural systems, the cultural norms in place to support somebody, mom who is postpartum, then it feels like you have to figure everything out on your own. When you are trying to figure out everything on your own, you don't have any context, any perspective really on what's like normal and not normal. Like, for instance, if it's normal for babies to have a sleep regression around 4 months, but you don't, let's just say you don't know that, and your child is very fussy and they're hard to console and it's difficult to get them settled, you as the mom can feel like the failure, or that you don't know what you're doing, or that you're not good enough. But in reality, it's the system that has failed and left you feeling alone. The system should be set up in a way that helps you feel supported, gives you information, gives you resources. Um, it has other people to talk to in your community who can say, like, oh, yeah, that's a pretty kind of normal thing for babies to do. It's not you. You're not doing anything wrong. You're doing everything you can to support and settle your child. This is just like a hard period of time. So the loneliness that people are feeling is this unwarranted and really honestly unfair self-characterization that like, if I'm the mother, I'm doing something wrong. And when you're in a headspace of I'm doing something wrong and you're like dealing with depression or dealing with anxiety, it is very hard to find enough perspective to say, like, well, actually, wait a minute. Maybe, maybe the system sucks. Maybe if I had more support, I wouldn't feel like this. You just feel bad. You feel bad about yourself. You feel bad about the job that you're doing. You wonder if you're good enough, if you're worthy, if you're, doing enough for your child. And that part makes me so mad. These are the ways that we have failed new moms, by letting them just sort of wander and float out there, as if they're supposed to, oh, let's see, grow a human somehow, birth that human, but whether it's vaginally, whether it's C-section, get them out, recover from all of that, which is a huge feat in and of itself, be sleep deprived, trying to feed a human from your body. And if feeding a human from your body isn't part of what you can do or want to do, you are still responsible for feeding a human every however many hours. Like, it takes a lot of time. And at the, I mean, there are so many other things to pull into this context, but at the same time, you're also trying to figure out who you are as a new mom. Your life has just changed, like, very dramatically, in some very beautiful and sometimes very difficult ways. So you're trying to take care of a human while also trying to figure out what this means for your life, like who you are as a mom, how you want this to look, what you want your experience to be. And for some people, those choices are sort of taken away from you if you don't have options, if you don't have support. You got to make it work. And man, do I see a lot of people make it work in not ideal situations. It really breaks my heart so much to see people suffering and then questioning their worth as a parent, and not be able to see how hard they're working to support their child, how hard they're working to just like heal and maintain themselves. It is just so easy, especially if you're on that like slippery slope of feeling lonely, feeling depressed, feeling anxious. It is so easy to see the negative, to see what's quote unquote wrong, see ways that you could or should improve, but then not have the support to change anything. Oh, ugh, it's really upsetting. Like, if we had the support we needed, yeah, things would feel a lot better. If we didn't feel alone, things would feel a lot better. It would make the hard things less hard. I'm interested to know from those of you who are listening, what are the ways in which you felt lonely? Because it is such a common experience, and it is not talked about enough. People do talk about it, but not enough. And I think it would be useful for other folks who are listening to know that the type of loneliness that they're experiencing, the way in which they're experiencing loneliness, is also felt by other people. That is one way of feeling less alone, is to know that somebody else out there has a similar experience. So I would love for you to write into me at drcat@momandmind.com. Send me an email. If you don't want to send an email, you can send me a direct message at Mom and Mind on Instagram or whatever, Facebook, TikTok. I don't even know. Well, come find me and let me know how you have experienced loneliness, what impact that has had on you. And with your permission, I'd like to share that with everybody else. And I will leave everything anonymous. You don't need to necessarily share your name or your contact information, but it if I can just share a little snippet of the way in which you felt lonely, whether it's a couple of words or a sentence or a paragraph, please let me know, if you feel comfortable writing in, and just, be sure to know that I will keep all of it anonymous. But I would like to share it back out with everyone so that we can understand our shared experience and don't have to feel so isolated and in the dark and um, wondering and worrying, is it me? Am I crazy? Am I the only one who's experiencing this? I can tell you from where I'm sitting, if you're feeling any of what I've talked about today, you're definitely not the only one who's experienced it. But it's one thing to have that be sort of like theoretical, like, oh yeah, other people experience these things too. But to have a story connected to it, to have the words, to have the context so that other people can see and reflect, and know that this is a shared experience with a real life human, can be incredibly healing. So I thank you so much for joining me today. Please, if any of this has resonated with you, send this along to somebody who could benefit from hearing this. And also, I invite you to share with me a little bit of your experience, a word, a sentence, a paragraph about how loneliness in pregnancy or postpartum impacted you. And I'd be happy to share that with other people, so that they know that they're not alone. Thank you so much for being with me. Until next time.